it feels almost criminal to ask my producer, Steve, to fade out on that, but fade we must, begin we must, and I'm looking forward to this panel. This is the last panel of this August's Streaming Media Connect. I am Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the chair of Streaming Media Events and also the CMO of Ideas. Thanks to everyone who's attended all week long. I guess it hasn't been a whole week, but all 3 days. And I'm looking forward to wrapping it up in style with this discussion about interactive video. Also, I'm looking forward to Streaming Media West in November 15th and 16th in Huntington Beach, California, which if you live in Wisconsin like me, is a pretty good place to go in November. The program just went live this week. You can check it out at the link that Steve just posted in the chat. And if you're interested in speaking, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can drop me a note here. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm easily found, I guess. Couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone here is eligible to win an Amazon gift card, but the one who will win it is the one who correctly guesses the name and artist of the track that was played during the slideshow. So we've got a couple of guesses in the chat already, some from people who've already won. Steve and I'll figure it out. If you have questions for our panel, please put them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. That way it's easier for us to kind of keep track of them if they're there rather than in the chat. We have webcams in all of your houses, and we can see if you're using Shazam to guess the song title, by the way, or if you used Shazam. Also, subtitles are turned on. So if you see a transcript running across the bottom of your screen and you don't want it there, you can go to live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom window, click on disable transcript, and that will turn it off. And finally, all of our Streaming Media Connect sessions will be available on demand starting next Monday at our YouTube channel. And Steve will pop that link into the chat as well. I would like to thank Media Silo. They've sponsored this whole event, which began Tuesday morning. They're our diamond sponsor, and we have a brief video message from them. And I would also like to thank the sponsor of this panel, Nanocosmos, and Oliver Lietz from Nanocosmos will be joining the discussion in just a moment. As I said, it's all about interactive video, both from a technical standpoint and from a business and content standpoint. We couldn't have a better group of panelists to speak about it, and we couldn't have a better moderator than Chris Pfaff. Chris, welcome. Chris moderated.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, you moderated a kick-ass panel earlier this week, and so the pressure's on, my friend.
As always, we can't rest on our laurels or our batons or our CDNs or whatever else we might rest on. But this is a great panel, I think, because among other things, it really is a topic that touches more than just the kind of collaboration that we know in terms of events or things that people know from esports to betting. And as Eric said, we really do have an amazing panel, and I'm going to go sort of from east to west here. Erdal Kilinc joins us from Espoo, Finland. He's the CEO of Deal Room Events. I've known Erdal for many, many years and used the Deal Room platform, which is unique, and you'll find out why. A little farther west in Berlin is Oliver Lietz, the aforementioned Oliver Lietz. Welcome, Oliver, CEO of Nanocosmos, and yes, the sponsor of this panel, and one of the leaders in ultra low latency streaming. We're going to go west now to Darcy Lawrence in Scottsdale, Arizona. He's currently the CTO of Barrett-Jackson Auction Company, which is now an IMG company. And yes, those are cars behind you. And if you don't know, well, that is kind of what Barrett-Jackson does. I've known Darcy for more than 20 years. He's been one of the leaders in streaming with Origin Media and many other great places. Welcome, Darcy. Last but not least, from LA, we have Beth Norber, and she's a director of accounts with Mainstream Media. Welcome to you, Beth. For those who don't know, Mainstream Media is a producer of interactive events and virtual events. And I think, this is an interesting panel, as I said, because there are so many statistics out there in terms of where things like trade shows have gone. Statista has a statistic at 1/5 of all of last year's trade shows were organized as virtual events. Yes, we're coming back together. And as Eric mentioned, we will be in Huntington Beach for the first Streaming Media West in person in a couple of years. But, I want to get a sense from each of you, if you feel that the customer for Interactivity is achieving their interactive objectives with today's technology. Oliver, why don't we start with you, because just give us a little bit of a background on what Nanocosmos is working on.
All right, thanks, Chris. So we are working on a live streaming platform. Our platform is NanoStream Cloud for interactive use cases. It's basically now a global CDN for ultra low latency live streaming. And it now also includes advanced analytics to get insight into the quality of service and security measures. And we come to this during the discussion, I guess, about the requirements which customers face during this time.
Yeah, and I mean, do you find that there's been a big uptick in the need to do the kind of global streaming at the the speeds and feeds that you can produce? Has that been have you seen an increase in that in the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. Since the pandemic started, of course, everything changed and everybody is now used to get video everywhere. It's not only for work at home things, but also being on mobile. We see the large majority of streams now being on mobile. So mobile first is really accelerating. And for interactive use case, that means that you need also have an innovation in the front end things like interaction elements separate to the video. We see more and more content getting interactive, and also, as I said, the need for getting transparency and insight into the quality of service is very, very important. But I also see a kind of segmentation in the areas now, and everything is getting more mature. So on the one hand, you have this classical webinar style live streams with interaction for business and enterprise spaces. But on the other hand, you have a large and growing area in monetized content for 24/7 operations like auctioning, betting, gaming, all this stuff, which also other participants here are working on.
Right, and that's a great segue to Darcy, because again, you're in a very high volume, high demand space. Are you? I mean, since you've been with Barrett-Jackson, what have you seen that suggests that customers are becoming more engaged and demanding more from what you provide?
Well, selling cars went online in a big way during the pandemic, and there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Our experiences, of course, have to combine three things. We've got to be able to provide a real-time experience from a live auction, along with the ability for the viewers to be participants in form of either buying a vehicle, chatting with us about cars, and then the online auction also has a fantasy bid perspective. So you don't have to be buying cars. You can just want to come in and join a contest. All of those have to come in together in the same frame on the same piece of video, and it can't be anything other than real time. So it's a pretty unique challenge, and we're selling millions of dollars worth of cars every hour. If we get a hiccup in our world, it goes down to the bottom line pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, this is again, we've now gotten to a point where the streaming world is not the adjunct. I mean, that's not news to anybody, but I think that from the standpoint of where we either try to replicate things that we used to do in real life, or maybe augment, I find that what you're doing is it's a huge challenge. But I think you guys, given the fact that you're now part of IMG, that ups the ante. And speaking of events, let's talk to Erdal. Erdal, you're in this unique position because, quite frankly, no one really does still what you do. For those who don't know, Deal Room was designed as a way for people to set up meetings in person at in-person events as a persistent platform. It uses unique AI to do that, to match people. And then, of course, with a nice web RTC client, not long after the pandemic hit, became much more of an event platform. So you're really enabling people to do both hybrid and virtual events, and encouraging much greater levels of interactivity. Talk about, you know, where things have gone in the last year for you in that sense.
Yeah, hi. I hope my sound is coming clear and my camera is okay. This is the thing that we keep hearing for us to 2.5 years, right? Okay, so basically, it's about building the digital trust. The interactivity actually comes from the digital trust. Like, we have to learn to trust each other during digital encounters, like in a meeting, online meeting, or webinars, or roundtable breakouts, or etc. So what happens is when you attend to a real event, what you do, you are listening to this kind of a fireside chat, and then you are sitting next to Jason and Joel and then Keith, and you know, after the panel or the fireside, you have a chance to go say hi to Chris and get a selfie, which Chris will post on LinkedIn. And then you can also meet the person, the guy or the nice lady next to you, and have a chat because you are sharing the same common interests. So it brings you to the interactivity level. And now we are a panelist here, an online event. When I go through the name list here, unfortunately, the number of females that I can realize is around 5, which around 70 guys are here. So basically, there's something on the human aspect, it's broken, like lots of things, lots of interactions are not there. So for us to bring this interactivity into the place, we want to replicate the real in-person events as much as possible. So what we do is, like, when there's an event platform, when there's an event, the D-Room platform is open way in advance so that everybody can see who is the speaker, who is the host, who is the exhibitor, and online, and also who else is attending with what roles, like are they buyers, sellers, investors, startups, talent, recruiters, auctioneers, whatever, you name it. And then they can chat, and they can also book one-on-one meetings while they also manage their agenda, like which panel they want to watch it and not. And then after, let's say, the webinar is finished, you can set up a kind of a round table or a breakout room that, you know, you can have Ask Me Anything or Q&A live with the audience that can attend to the room. Like in physical events, you set up a room of 20, 30 people, or a workshop or a dinner table, and then you can assign. So this is how we designed to bring the interactivity in online events. And when it comes to the back to the story, sorry, Chris, I'm taking long. 3 months before COVID, we start working on hybrid events. And the reason why we start working on hybrid events was there are moms on maternity leave, dads on paternity. I live in Finland, so in Scandinavian countries, like the maternity plus paternity is like around 13 months, which mom and dad can share. So there are, like, you know, event venues are not really disabled friendly. Like, not only the wheelchair people, like blind people or hearing aid required people, and etc. And then I myself, I have an allergy to perfumes, which kicks my migraine. And I really don't like, I'm in the industry and I don't like to go to events because it kicks my migraine. And there are introverts that doesn't like to get into the crowds. So we start building up the interactivity for in-person events to be able to bring these, like, you know, people to the events to at least watch the content, also chat with other people so that their learning, their improvement, and their networking efforts can still go ahead. And the crisis, the COVID crisis hit, the technology was ready to bring the whole aspects, like, you know, get to know before each other before the webinar.
Right.
And during the webinar, you are watching the content, and after the webinar, you are able to interact with each other plus the speakers.
Right. Well, again, I think that you know, this is where the management of the event in terms of networking, which is really kind of the holy grail, which you seem to do well. And I think it requires people to understand how to do this in some kind of bi-directional and not a static way. But that's also a function of the producer, and that's where Beth comes in. You know, Beth, you say at Mainstream Media that if you can dream it, you can stream it. I do love that line. And I think that the level of interactivity you can dream up these days that extends this virtual event into something like a real in-person event is where you're going. And so why don't you talk about, some of the things you're doing that help to up that ante in terms of live interactivity.
For sure. And I think one of the things we're always trying to put at the forefront of our thoughts is meeting the audiences where they're at, but also taking the lead and following them where they want to go. Our clients are so much more sophisticated now than they were a year ago, let alone at the beginning of the pandemic. And clients and in turn their audiences. So it's dreaming up new ways, whether that's bridging that gap between that in-person audience and the virtual audience, how we do that through the engagement, working with our producers and our technical directors to find those ways to maybe create some exclusive experiences for both audiences that, if I'm going to attend an event in person, I'm an introvert. Why do I want to go leave the house if I can just stay at home and watch it, right? So what are those engagement opportunities for both audiences? The ones for in-person are fairly natural. What about the folks who are at home for whatever reason they're at home? And so we're working with all of our clients, following their leads. A lot of the big tech companies do this really, really well, but some of our fundraising, our nonprofit clients are just breaking into this space, and really because of the level of sophistication that we've seen throughout, we're really kept on our toes to find out the new and the next, whether that's different platforms, different virtual event platforms, beyond the Zooms and the YouTubes and whatnot. What are the different interactions and engagements that can happen in some of these platforms? So a lot of it ends up with that. A lot of it ends up with the content. You've got
Right.
Netflix and Hulu and Amazon pushing out tons and tons of content throughout the pandemic, which is fantastic. That's the quality and that's the experience that people now expect from your webinar.
Exactly. I think, Darcy, I mean, and I want everyone to talk about this in terms of what I think is the biggest issue here, which is scale. And Darcy, maybe you can give us a feeling for what your issues are in terms of the size of your audiences, and what the volume of your events is, just to give people sort of an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess scales in a bunch of buckets, but as far as in total number of interested people, everybody has to have the same network, because we don't know if they're going to bid at any point in time, or be in the fantasy bid, or just be a viewer. So we have a low latency network that's global, and everybody gets it. So you get a great experience no matter if you're just a viewer or a participant. But that doesn't necessarily finish the scale, because we also have to have the ability to transact. So we have to have e-commerce in real time layered on that. We're now doing augmented reality. You start getting into web AR, now you got to figure out how to overlay that in real time. So the scale really, I think, is about the experience. I don't think the reach for us is a problem anymore. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, as you know, Chris, and I think we conquered reach and scale a while ago, but that was just for one way, or kind of a push. Now it's interactive. So there's definitely pressure on the network, and we don't have a single point of failure. We've got 4 networks at any point in time that all have to serve a certain parts of our experience. You have to have a multi-vendor approach. The greatest networks in the world just don't get you everywhere where there's a buyer. And we have people in Middle East. We've got people in Asia, Australia. I mean, they're all in that event, and they're all wanting to buy that object that's a collector car. So it's these new things, really, the gamification, that's going to create the biggest stress for us, especially when they're web objects and they're coming from some obscure place, or even if it's not obscure, it just has to be a common experience. And that's really where it is common for us. It's frame by frame, frame accurate, and nothing falls off. And if it does, it's not on the table for us to develop, at least on our main events. Now, we also have an online auction company that sells cars every day, and that's where we cut our teeth. we try and push the boundaries of that because we can make decisions about those people. They're not buying $1 million cars, they're buying, you know, different vehicles. Not that they're not important, but when somebody's trying to hook up on a $10 million Batmobile and they're in Australia, they're the #1 candidate to stay on air.
Always the Aussies. And you know it's Peter Jackson. You know it's Peter Jackson, right? He's a Warner Brothers guy. It's just you know, he's just never sleeps. But I think that you know that's we're seeing and it's just a function of the evolution of technology. Yes, the pandemic helped accelerate some of it, but things like watch parties. I mean, you see this obviously in sports. I think it's going to find its way into other, you know, domains. But, you know, Oliver, I mean, when it comes to the global scalability, you know, we used to talk about points of presence and CDNs, and but, you know, you're getting into some very fine slices of the ULL, ultra low latency sort of spectrum. You know, give us, you don't need to mention the customer name, obviously, but, you know, in the situation where just even the area that they're in, but you know, give us some sort of highlights recently of some hero projects that you've had, just to give people an idea of what you guys are up to.
Yeah, absolutely. The as Darcy was mentioning, the audience is everywhere now, all around the world. So we have customers from South America streaming to Southeast Asia and the other way around, and that's for 24/7 operation things, and the in the enterprise space as well. So people wanting to join their whole employee space from Europe to all around the world. So that's given, and everyone expects having engaging audiences then to enable interaction with kind of polls, voting, etc., or even buying things like in the auctioning space. And I still see a difference somehow between the OTT space, when you have that lean back experience, large screens on a TV, like Premier League or NFL sports, and the interactive things where you also have a completely different user experience and user front end, user interface. And also the audience is more specific, dedicated to this use case. So usually our customers have this large audience in kind of traditional OTT space, and then specific dedicated audiences for the gaming content, gamified content, who does then betting or purchasing or whatever things in the entertainment space.
Right. I mean, you know, obviously Twitch has been, and of course, as acquired many years ago now by Amazon, but Twitch has kind of sort of shown the way for what you can do with that size of global network, and basically layering in different experiences, which is to me just fascinating. I remember having conversations with Enter Records. I don't know if you know them. They're an imprint of Universal, and they were basically selling music that would be streamed during you know, esports events, which is really kind of brilliant. You know, the idea that you throw some tracks down and, you know, have people in India while they're watching an ESL thing from Germany or whatever. So I find that you know, we're all saying some of the same things about sports and gaming leading the way, but I'm very curious about the enterprise space. And Erdal, you do you know, some very different things with enterprise customers. What's been your experience in terms of the maturation process? And maybe you can give us some examples of some of the people you're working with.
Like on the enterprise level, you mean that these big companies that are running events, right?
Correct.
So basically, especially in Asia and Europe, that's like kind of companies, like, you know, yeah, in the media is a marketing channel, right? And events are another marketing channel. Now with online events, actually events and media together is becoming like another channel together, like merger channel. So we had corporates running their internal events, like, you know, team building events or roadmap events or etc. And then we had companies that had mergers, like big global companies that had mergers, so that they want to build the culture using the platform, so that, like, you know, people can listen to content that the HR manager, you know, see HR and see something, see whatever it is. And then like departments whatsoever, and then people were able to book one-on-one meetings. And we also had some corporates using our platform to do showcases and product launches. So basically what you do in an event when you launch a product, you are expecting people to come and ask you questions, and then your employees or your team are answering questions. So same thing moved into the online world, not just a small, simple webinar, but like a full-scale online event that your potential customer, your leads are coming and registering. I remember back in time, at the very early stages of the COVID, we had a Finnish company that wanted to run a one-day webinar, and the agreement, it was like they were expecting around a couple of hundred people. And then a week before the event, I had to call them. I was like, look, the numbers have already passed a couple of thousand. So, your invoice is going to be a really fat invoice. Are you sure you want to do that? They were like, no, don't touch it. It's great. Like, collecting a lead, a verified lead, that the email is verified, this and that. And then we will know what content, which product they were listening. So the value of that is like not less than 100 euros. Instead, what we are paying for the event and all the curation, it's going to cost us much less. So they were extremely happy that now the whole marketing teams were focused on running events, running content, and engaging their potential partners or customers.
Yeah, that's exactly where I see this going, because I think as particularly Darcy and Oliver have mentioned, the scale issue is not so much the issue. It's more, it seems to be the quality of experience and the quality of service. But from a producer's point of view, and Beth, this is what I want you to talk about. From a producer's point of view, there's so much more that can be layered in now, and Darcy mentioned some of the AR work that they've been doing. What are you doing in terms of the hybrid sort of XR and 2D world? Is that more of a demand for you now?
There are many clients that are asking for the AR, and there are some specific platforms that are particularly well suited for this. Some of them that we see, sometimes we're layering in some elements of VR. Those are largely obviously for some of the in-person events. On the AR side, using platforms, spatial.io, gather.town. These, don't really scale very well, but with portals and other things. So we've been using some of those. It really is dependent upon the size of the client, size of that, that budget, how much they want to put into that. I think that it really is the gaming companies, the Amazons, the tech companies, the media companies that are on the leading edge of that for their events. As Erdal said, right, the line has been blurred between product launches and media events and whatnot, which is cool to see. But I go back to, the business meeting, the fundraising event, the sort of bread and butter, most of what we're seeing on a daily basis. And I don't know that their audiences are totally open to some of that yet. They see it, they know it's out there. Are they ready for it themselves? Is the client ready for that? To think about such an immersive, integrated experience, we're trying to lead them there, baby steps of the way. And accessibility is always at the forefront of our mind and our clients' minds in terms of how accessible these types of experiences are, in terms of really literally just internet speeds and some of the basics, right? Like if you're a busy executive and you're calling in on your phone to have an experience, right? How is that content being delivered? That's so super important. But for big brands, we're seeing the big brands absolutely lead the way there.
And is that an in-house agency? Are you working with in-house agencies, or are we talking more Fortune 1000 companies? Because, of course, from an event standpoint, historically, you've got, some of the biggest, certainly in North America, event producers have been companies like SAP and Salesforce and Oracle and Microsoft, a lot on the, classic enterprise software sales. Is that still the issue, or have we seen more of a take up from, let's say, CPG companies?
I think it's still that highest tier of companies that is, pushing the boundaries when it comes to these events. They're the ones that have the relationships that can do those big branded events, co-branded with the YouTubes or the Fortnites or whatever, or the really large, the big headline artist that is going to be that biggest draw. And certainly some of those companies are willing to take the risk, not only financially, but with some of the technology that we all may be super comfortable with because we're in it every day, but maybe their executives or maybe their audience are not as open to it. But it is definitely something that feels really exclusive, feels really in demand for certain clientele, and again, it'll trickle down to, I think, most of the events that we're all seeing on a daily basis.
Right.
We're
And
part of.
yeah, Oliver, talk about what's happening with respect to, we talk about gamification. I think the biggest change has been real interactivity for what you do as opposed to just static broadcast. It seems to me that those elements are being built in more. Is this something that you work on with telco clients as well, or give me a feeling for what levels of interactivity you're seeing?
Yeah, we see that both in the enterprise space and also in kind of new innovations coming from smaller companies. And you brought up interesting points, because on the one hand, you see the high demand for innovations, like Erdal was mentioning. You have a huge demand for human aspects, for personal aspects in these meetings. So we are now in this closed group of panelists here, but how do we interact with the real world? And also what Beth was mentioning, I don't know if the solution would be something like AR, because it feels like more closed environment, but I think there's really demand and also room for a lot of innovation here in that space, and we are not there yet for having that fully immersive. So we're working on several aspects there, and we see a lot of innovation coming from customers. We see a lot of innovation coming from platforms like Deal Room Events, who tries to better engage real life audiences with virtual audiences. So this hybrid space is really interesting, and we've been working on that as also in research projects early on. So we've been always in the forefront of innovation for 3D live streaming, stereoscopic streamings. We've been doing 360 live streaming, but that's all not a large part of the business. And I still think there's a gap between the expectation of the audience and what is really possible right now. So then that's the gap which can be filled by innovations from the business coming up.
Yeah, I see that kind of classic crossing the chasm situation right now. I mean, I've been on the sort of the jury of the ARIA Awards for a couple of years, thanks to Felix Stima, whom you may know as well. And of course, they couldn't get into Europa Park because of the pandemic, so they created this sort of virtual world and then broadcast from Europa Park, which I thought was really cool. I mean, what are, from a producer's point of view, and all of you, are venues, do they matter from a studio perspective? I mean, Darcy, give me your take on this, because of course, you guys are selling some spiffy stuff to people who can drop some coin. What is that experience level like?
The venues is still a mess, like it's been for 30 years. If you're an NFL, team, I guess you have some consistency across your properties. And if you're good enough, if you can get into one of those places and it's a persistent infrastructure, then you're in good shape. But they actually pull it out, or it's not usable outside of their games if you go to one of those venues. So it's still, the 4 places we go, our big event in Scottsdale, Las Vegas, Houston, and Florida, they're all different providers. I'm talking about first and last mile. It's a nightmare. And inside of the venue itself, Las Vegas West Hall is the most modern place that I can think of, and it's got everything, but it's still tough because the provider doesn't know what we're trying to do, and they're just throwing bandwidth at problems that probably should be a little bit, a few layers up from that. And then they charge you astronomical amounts to achieve something that you could buy at home for $1, cost you $1 million when you get into their stupid, you know, little world of what they own in that place. They should be a lot more, I guess, intuitive about what we're trying to achieve, because they attract a lot more to their venue if they really got together with us. So really we just look at what's the raw bandwidth, we'll layer everything else on, because if we just relied on those 4 venues to do anything, we'd have to have 4 different teams doing 4 different things, and we're consistent. We just ask for the bandwidth and we go and do our own. When we're online in open world selling cars every day, you know, it's good because it's coming from our source, it's our origin. We can kind of control it all, but again, the other problem is what's happening out on the endpoints. So we control everything from origin to player, and we don't take anything for granted. We don't want to have anybody's stuff in the middle. Of course, the CDNs that we use and the delivery networks are all different, but they all have, you know, beauty is everybody's got standards finally of some sort. If it's RTC stuff, great. If it's something else, as long as they're standardized, we'll use it. And that takes a lot off the plate. But, you know, even just dealing with the venue, the multiple vendors that are in the venue, multiple delivery points, and then all the people that want to connect to you, and they may be in a bar, not at home. They may be on a mobile device. They may be in a theater. They're all over the place. Normalizing that has been our biggest challenge, but we equalize and normalize every packet now to every player. So it doesn't matter where you are on what device, you're going to get the same identical experience. And now that we're moving into some of the things where it's fantasy bidding, and you know, ultimately there may be some gambling going on, you just can't rely on just showing up at a venue and hoping, praying it's going to work for you, especially if you're going to be in the interactive world.
No, and particularly where there are regulatory issues as well. And I think that becomes a much bigger issue. I mean, and Oliver, in a mobile first world, as you mentioned so rightly, where does 5G come into all of this? I mean, you know, in the US, I think most of us who know a little something about the telco world know that consumers will probably see that realized within maybe 3 or 4 years, 4G being, you know, quite an effort to tack down. But is that something that you see from either a venue perspective or an installation, or does it matter at all?
It matters in terms of just more accessibility for the audience. It's not the solution for everything, because it might be a good solution if you have a kind of bundling upstream studio-based network, but for being on the move for the audience, it's only part of the solution. So it's great if we have that network, but you will still land in whatever 3G, 2G gaps, and having an adaptation in the service and adaptive streaming, which really keeps up the interaction, is very important. So it's not always that you keep that high level of quality everywhere, and to adjust and to adapt to that is also very important. And then also, of course, noticing that and getting an idea where your audience is, on which devices, which networks, etc. So it's good to have 5G, but it's more like a natural growth, in my opinion. And with the exception maybe for the studio-based environment, where you can better combine upstream environments.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a big challenge. I mean, Erdal, you don't necessarily have that issue so much, but at the same time, you know, you have this legacy of being very much a person-to-person, in-person, you know, platform. So in this quasi post-pandemic world, how is that going in terms of doing the level of interactivity with hybrid events, which I think a lot of people are just coming back into now?
So, Chris, I don't know if my internet is still stable.
It looks pretty good. Just don't move around a lot. Just kidding.
Yeah, so it was getting unstable. I was trying to find the correct spot. So basically, the hybrid part is the industry is still looking at the hybrid part just to stream out the content to the user that's in a distance, like at home or in the office or in another country, and also bringing the remote speaker into the stage. However, when we look into the aspect, it's like about the interactivity, and then how you get the other people, like attendees and exhibitors, interact with each other while someone at the venue showcasing their products or hanging around, and someone is at home. or in their offices. So this is for us is the real hybrid, which what we try to achieve at a higher level and bring these people and then ask them if they are going to be online or on site. However, on the hybrid aspect, there will be lots of changes. Like our habits are going to change and the technology is going to change. Nowadays all over Europe, and I'm sure that in States and Canada, it's a similar thing that we are invaded by scooters, right? So when Chris, you are a frequenter of on-site events, and I think in a few weeks you're going to be in IBC, in Amsterdam, and etc. And if you don't have a European phone, your internet bandwidth will be a disaster because the venue cannot provide you good bandwidth for a couple of thousand people. But with the 5G, you will realize that even the venue bandwidth on Wi-Fi is going to be much more stronger. So you can have different elements of hybrid that you can bring AR to the venue, and etc. So coming back, when we're talking about, Darcy was talking about the event venues and events in-person events. Yes, the industry has to switch. Events are not real estate businesses. People go to events to learn, to interact, to connect, and to showcase.
Right.
However,
That's
events
right.
in person, even post-COVID, events are still doing the estate business, short-term 2-3 day estate business. So with the technology, with the developing infrastructure, 5G, and then the Web3 and AR and the VR, and with AI, I'm sure that there will be more elements of this hybrid element.
Yeah, and I think that
There he goes. He's on 5G.
Someone from
he's
Asia will be able to send the avatar to IBC, and all over there are going to see it.
Exactly.
I'm still connected.
Yeah, you're still here. You're still here. Fabulous. But this is, since you mentioned IBC, of course, this is a very traditional European broadcast show and has not been held in person in 3 years. And in this intervening 3 years, a whole lot has happened in terms of distribution. But this arena of interactivity is still, very much, a world we've been talking about for a long time, and all of you are now bringing it, together. But I think that the ability to reach passion verticals, passion audiences, I think is really key as well. And I think that we've, seen that the financial services markets, who have, unbelievably, blazingly fast throughput, have certainly, upped the ante for people who are in Darcy's world. But I think that, Oliver, I mean, you're in Germany, which likes to tout having, some of the best telecom networks, but also has had a good history with some interactive production side. I mean, I get a sense that more and more of what you're doing is very much a global situation. So, that opportunity, because we're not all getting on planes to go to Australia, where Darcy's customers are. I mean, are you finding that you've had to really build out more, with your clients to help create a better user experience for those audiences?
Yeah, sure. And I'm not sure if I would agree that we have the best telecom networks here. So I think it's much better in Finland, where Erdal is sitting. So you might be surprised to land in some difficult networks here. But anyways, it's always a global approach, and having customers in Australia sending out auctioning streams or anywhere else in the world, you never know what kind of networks the audience has, and you can try your best to have a great production environment. That's always very important, to have the original source in the best quality of service. So there are also kind of strange implementations of live encoding software, cameras, whatever stuff, which increase latency already in the source. So it's very important to have the whole setup right from the beginning. Can be easy, but it can also be challenging. And then the distribution around the world to every client, especially in mobile, is challenging, of course. And there where customers are asking for help, starting from initial kind of success, you have a successful first impression then, but in the end, live production with a growing audience is another ball game. And
Right.
that's where we need a reliability which is 100%, and also great support to get and keep things up and running.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, the issues of failover, and of course live being where the money is, certainly in areas like broadcasting. But when it comes to you know, a whole sort of panoply of live events, you know, I also look at that accessibility from the 2D perspective. There are those of us who tried to get in to the Foo Fighters post Super Bowl concert in VR. And I think only 13,000 of the 60,000 or so were able to. So I watched it in 2D. And that was live on tape. So really no interactivity there. It's just a virtual environment, Horizon Worlds. But I mean, do you find that you're having to do more in areas of like holographic streaming and 3D? Is that more of an experimentation layer, or is that something that that people are becoming more familiar with now?
I would still see it experimental, because I think the user experience is not there. It's just blocking somehow. You are not really interactive with your neighbors or the other participants, the other viewers. So I think there's still a way to go. So we did some experiments also in fan engagement from stadium environments, etc., 360. And I think in the end, it might be simpler to have a panorama view where you can just scroll instead of having a VR headset, which is much more distracting. And in the end, you somehow can't watch the whole game. So it's I think I'm not fully convinced that we are there yet.
Yeah, Beth, I mean, as a producer, you're involved in obviously satisfying what your clients' needs are, but you know, for somebody who may have started out just doing live events without having to stream, you know, what level of daring do you get up to with your clients? And I mean, what sorts of creative elements can you talk about in terms of, you know, what level of engagement they're looking to bring in with audiences?
Sure. So our clients across the board, no matter the industry, are always asking for audience engagement, right? It will depend on a number of different factors, not the least of which is, you know, where are we streaming from, what the venue is, you know, in terms of how interactive we can get, to hard, you know, costs, right? And so the level of risk that they're feeling comfortable with, we see the Super Bowl events, right? They're going for the big, the flash, you know, the splash, as opposed to, you know, the financial firms that just need to do an investor meeting, and, you know, maybe just a really good Q&A is their version of interactivity. But I think overall the demand has been very high for that. Even though audiences are getting a little bit more sophisticated here and there, across the board, everything that I'm seeing from our clients is great. How can we be more engaging? How can we be a little bit more interactive? And some of the elements that we see in Twitch streams, I had a nonprofit client say, well, can we at least just fill the screen a little bit more, right? Their audience certainly was not ready for a Twitch environment. They're a little bit of an older crowd. I think we would have blown their mind if we had actually streamed the event on Twitch, but sure enough, we can try to get some of that on screen with broadcast graphics, pop-up video, right? Remember that old, you know, what was it, MTV or VH1, right? They wanted fun facts coming on across their
Right.
Screen.
Right.
Great.
But
you
it's
know,
interesting.
right? And then for them, that was exciting. That was new. And so great, that's where their audience is at. Whereas another audience is the idea of a really engaging chat conversation. That's interaction to them. So it literally is each and every single client and each and every single event that we're doing for those clients. Is different.
I get it. And so to that end, I'm going to ask all of you, who do you think, aside from yourselves, is doing great interactive streaming right now? You know, I have my own answers on that, but we'll start with you, Darcy.
You said Twitch already, so just go there fast because they definitely are doing what I think is the best job at scale. I guess I can, last week I would have said IMG. I mean, you watch a UFC fight, there's some amazing graphics that they're doing, bringing data, visualization, and then computer vision to play in real time. Awesome experiences there. Most of the major leagues are trying to figure this out and been trying for a long time. And some of them are doing a better job than others, but everybody's up their game for sure. They've had to in the last 2 years when they didn't have people in the stands. They had to figure out how to make it interesting. And I think a lot of that's going to stick. People now have an experience they might not have seen for another 5-10 years. They've seen it. They can't put the genie back in the bottle. So major leagues, any kind of sports, obviously, and I look at gaming as the bellwether. 3 billion gamers can't be wrong. So
yeah,
I like gaming.
I think that I see some great streaming graphics for like La Liga. SNY here in New York has deployed the likes of Everts and Scenic for these watch parties, which are really, I think they do a great job. Watching on the iPhone, it's fantastic. Oliver, give us your thoughts on who besides Nanocosmos is doing great streaming.
Difficult to tell, but I see a lot of innovation also coming, for example, from the sports betting industry. They're creating nice kind of sports event style applications around with betting, which is quite interesting. But sometimes it's just the easy things, as Beth was mentioning. If you have a good Q&A running and a good chat running, that's much more engaging because it's easier accessible than anything else. And when you have a look at that, just look at what we are doing here. We are doing Zoom, which is working nicely, but all the user interface is kind of still clumsy. You have this Q&A box, kind of old school layout. And look at the success from platforms like Slido or the others, which provided very simple Q&A thing with voting, which you can embed on a web page. It's a very simple tool, and you are surprised that no one else did the idea before, and they are very successful with these simple things. So, and that's what I meant. The simple innovations, you just need to think too far ahead. So technology is not driving this innovation. It's more like the user experience, user interface things, which
I agree.
Really need to come forward somehow.
Yeah, Erdal, who besides you at Deal Room, who do you think is doing great work in interactive?
I'm gonna say my friend Paul with Scenic.
Good. Well, we agree there.
Great startup from Germany, and then they were before COVID, like watch together parties, and they have really done a great job.
Yeah, I'm going to throw some love also to my folks here in New Jersey at Kiswe, because, they, of course, have done amazing stuff with BTS. For those who don't know, that's KISWE. Wim Sveldens, who I worked with a million years ago at Bell Labs, and his team have really kind of upped the bar. And of course, when you think of BTS and you think of Travis Scott and Fortnite, and of course the whole Roblox situation. So I think that the level of interactivity there still needs to be increased, which we all seem to be saying. And Beth, who besides you do you think is doing great work in interactive streaming?
Well, I was going to absolutely say, the Fortnite Travis Scott stream. I've got a 14-year-old. He's grown up in the pandemic. And so he's seeing experiences like this. And while they may not be up to exactly where we would want them to be, they're a little bit closer. And he sees that and he starts dreaming in his head. I've got a number of colleagues that do incredible Twitch streams that, are super interactive. I think across the board, though, esports, gaming, Call of Duty events, things like that, even what they're bringing into the live event space, Amazon, any event that Amazon touches, even if it's for their brands, it's just, they're really exciting. They're bringing a lot of interactive features, again, smaller scale, but that's where the buzz is going to be. Those influencers are.
Right, exactly.
Chris, I should have said Red Bull. I'm sorry. I saw a Red Bull person on earlier. I'm sorry I didn't say it because that should have been my #1 pick. Sorry.
Yeah, well, Red Bull, and of course our old buddy from Red Bull who's over at Venn, They seem to be upping their game. I would, we're not crystal balling necessarily here on this panel, but I would say that I would hope in the next year that we'll see more branded content plays in terms of interactive streaming from an event or even a pop-up event, because I think that the opportunity to gather audience and that audience that does that very old school human thing called word of mouth, I think is really massive. We don't have many questions in Q&A, but I do want to get to a question that Bill Kleinbacher asked about 15 minutes ago. I'm paraphrasing Bill here. What is the ultimate display for 3D streaming video, singular and plural, in these productions you're all talking about? Well, that's a jump ball, but Oliver, going to throw it to you first. So maybe you can give Bill some insight.
A 3D device, maybe a mobile phone, which you put into a headset. I don't know.
Darcy, what thoughts do you have on that?
When we were doing, when I was really involved in racing a few years ago, Rocket, they've got a 3D phone. Don't need any special headsets. I don't know why that technology is not taken off with other, the iOS and Android. But it's pretty amazing. There wasn't enough content, just like other things we've gone through. I think there'll be another generation, and that stuff, what they were doing, is going to become kind of standard on any mobile device.
Yeah, I remember that. And of course, I know at least a few people, including an old Finnish client, Digilist Group, that had a sort of a 3D holographic device itself. But I'm rather surprised. Erdal, you want to respond to that?
Basically, like nothing much more. It's like the Oculus and all kind of glasses or some, holographic devices. But it's like we have to see what's going to happen with the technology. Other than this answer, I want to go back to Beth with her teenager son. These teenagers actually are developing much better events and technologies and interactivity. I see my son, he's playing game on his computer. He has a headset that is connected to his cell phone. They're on Discord, like a gang of 20, 30 people, and they don't need any technology out there. So they're playing the game using Discord. So they're going like fully no code and creating amazing events. And I even see that, like, in Finland, there's this game called Floorball, which all the kids are playing, and the fans are mostly in Japan and in Singapore. And with this Discord and all kind of others like Twitch or etc., they're creating big tournaments and in real life.
Yeah, and I think again that comes back again. You mentioned Discord, back to where we're going in the gaming space, and I think that another projection I would make certainly is what will be done more in sort of this Web3 world, and what people might do with NFTs to bring in levels of engagement. I think even sort of private events. But I think we're almost up to the end here. So I'm, really just, I mean, it's a topic that I find has so many different avenues, and I love that Eric and the team provided us with this. But I'm just going to say a big thank you again to Darcy Lawrence from Barrett-Jackson, Oliver Lietz from Nanocosmos, Erdal Kilinc from Deal Room, Beth Norber, Mainstream Media. I'm Chris Pfaff with Chris Pfaff Tech Media. Thank you. And by the way, we talked about QS and stability. We were very stable here. We had 82 participants for most of the show here. So thank you to the audience who was interacting. And by the way, I didn't win the gift card, but I think that was Eleanor Rigby by Booker T, and whoever teed that up, should just pat themselves on the back. Back to you, Eric.
Choice.
If I was in Ithaca right now with Steve, I'd pat him on the back. Yes, that was indeed Booker T and the MGs covering the Beatles, not their classic Macklemore Avenue, where they cover the Abbey Road album and more from the Beatles. But anytime I get a chance to pull out my Macklemore Avenue vinyl, I do it. So yes, thanks to Steve for teeing up such great music all week. Garrick Huey got it right away, but he won earlier. So the winner is AV Trainer, who
Cool.
identified the artist at least and so identified enough to get the prize. Keep your eye out on your email. AV, thanks again to all of our speakers, sponsors, and audience members this week. Especially thank you to Nanocosmos for sponsoring this session, Media Silo for sponsoring all of our sessions. And that wraps things up for this Streaming Media Connect. We hope to see as many of you as possible at Streaming Media West in Huntington Beach in October. The water's a little chilly at that time, but the fish tacos at Pete's make the trip worth your while. See you then. Take care.
Peace.